Yeah, no headphones. I think we're good. Cool.
Greetings, welcome everybody. It's your boy Saint Icky, sitting here with my man JimmyITK,
How you doing, man?
beautiful downtown Chicago at Juggernaut,
Had to do it.
to discuss his new project, Samsara.
Yup, that's the one, baby.
Hell yeah, yo, yeah, yo, you. This is a surprise drop. You hit me with this shit a couple days ago. I didn't even know. I see you every week. I didn't even know that you was recording a new project for real.
Yeah, that was kind of. I think the mission of this one was just to kind of see how much I could fly under the radar and make it happen. To kind of just keep it a closed system, and kind of just create something kind of for myself completely with no outside intervention or like crowdsourcing the approval for it or asking people if it feels good. Just kind of like trusting my gut and letting something that I think that I've wanted to get off for a while and just haven't figured out how to do it, of balancing like being a hip hop producer and like all these things, or like feeling like I'm in a space where I feel comfortable to just drop like a sad R&B song or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yo. So last time we was here was the release of your last project, No Coast. And that was what? That was the beginning of 2022?
That was yeah, it was like July
July something
2022
around this time last
something
year
like
for real.
that, yeah.
And the styles of the projects are completely different for
Oh,
real.
for sure.
So No Coast is pretty much I would say it's a rap album. You got a couple
fair.
singing. You got a couple singing
Yeah, it's
parts on there.
it's definitely like a Chicago rap hip hop love letter.
What's the contrast of like making beats for that and like the beats on the new project?
I think anything that I ever make for myself kind of inadvertently always is like much more of like a spatial heady situation that I bring to the table for an artist. I think like for myself, I feel more comfortable to do something that's maybe a little bit less straightforward or is maybe like slower and dragged through the mud a little bit, And I feel like, in trying to like market ourselves and reach the next level all the time, it's like I feel like instinctually I dilute that a lot, kind of on purpose, because I feel like it's going to make it harder to market things sometimes, which is obviously the not the way to make the best art, which is why I kind of like stayed silent about this one, to kind of just like let go of all of that and be like, no, I'm gonna put out the songs that really just feel good for me to write. In this comparison, not to say that No Coast didn't feel good to write, it was just a different highlighting of like where I was at, and this one is definitely much more contemplative and deep and slow and kind of like, just sad. But it's more heady than sad. It's not intended to be sad, but it's definitely from a heavier standpoint than most of the projects that I've released up to this point.
Given that this one is more introspective, I would say that it kind of tell a story throughout the three songs. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
I was gonna say, was that an intention of yours? Did you come into recording this thinking that you was
Definitely.
gonna try to tie everything together?
Definitely. So the concept of samsara is a concept that's in a lot of like Indian religions. The one that I focus on is really from like Jainism, which is where like life is this repeating cycle of lifetimes that happens over and over, and you either elevate or digress based on your karmic returns of whatever you put into the universe the last time around. And it's kind of, while it is, lifetimes full of love and laughter and all of these things, existence always also comes with suffering. So the concept is really like you are continuing to live these lifetimes until you get to a point where you're like essentially ready to be done, and then you elevate to where you're like you escape the samsara, which is like the samsara is the cycle of life, death, rebirth. So when I was like juggling with titles for the album, I mean, the overall theme is death and whatever that means. So the first title that I really thought about was Death, whatever that means. And because it's not so much about like, the act of passing. It's really about like whatever comes after. And that's really like what I'm juggling on this project of like, A, what I did this time around, is it meaningful? What will the return of that be? Who am I in my current state against all the wrong that I've done? You know what I mean? And it's really just like looking at life through that lens of like, what are my karmic returns? I don't think I'm ready to be done yet. You know, I think if like when I think of like that cycle and like if you're at a point in your like life cycles where you're like ready to get off the ride and be done and find whatever that higher plane is to escape that cycle, like I'm not there. And I think that's like the human in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a lot of what the album is about, of like wondering what's on the other side of that, not wanting to get there, but also just looking at it like, you know, it's an inevitability, but I want it to keep going. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like celebrating the beauty of that, you know, and just like finding the meaning in all of it.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I love projects like this because I was just at the Art Institute right before I came here. I was walking around and I was looking at the paintings and stuff, and I was thinking about how like this is like a snapshot of like what somebody like how somebody was feeling at that time for real.
Definitely.
That's like stuck in there. And I feel like as I was going through it, I was listening to your project and shit, and I was like, I'm sure like going back listening to this, it'd bring you back to a certain
Oh, it's
place.
very, very cathartic. And I think it, again, of like the not, of the avoiding outside input was really just about like, I wanted to not dilute my thoughts to feel like streamlines to get the feeling across. I just wanted to say it the way that I felt it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like leaving things up to interpretation in that way, you know what I mean? And I think that the catharsis of it and let it just kind of like flow out allows whatever that moment is of like, you know, music flowing through you to really just happen and not really have to like think about it. I spent so much time being a producer that it's kind of like I'm calculating all the organic moments, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I really just wanted to kind of let that go.
Yeah. So you want to get the listeners like a walkthrough through the project, song by song?
Yeah, sure. So the album starts with RIP, which is pretty much a signifier of like, in terms of like, you know, the story line or like the concept or whatever is happening in the project. It really starts at the end, you know, of like RIP is really designed to be like the contemplative death moment and looking back of like the acceptance of like, okay, this is it. It's a wrap. It's the curtains. You know what I mean? And it's like looking back and saying like, you know, was everything that I did right or wrong, or what do those things even mean in the scope of like the environment that you're in or whatever, you know what I mean? Because a lot of it has to do with like, you know, I've I've become a more caring person, and like we all develop over our lifetime, you know what I mean? But I grew up in certain situations that push you to be, you know, maybe someone you're not proud of. And it's really juggling who you were against who you are. And looking at that in like the scope of the curtain call of death, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So RIP is really just that moment of contemplation. And then the next song, Sad Boy, is
Before we move on,
oh yeah.
my favorite part about the first song is the sample that you bring in at the end. What
Oh
sample is
yeah,
that?
I don't even know. It's really just like it was in a random collection of samples that I had, and I was like, wow, this is like that's like the one more time like perfectly fit into like the message of like the life cycles, you know what I mean? So I just found that sample and it was just like, oh my god, it's just the one.
As you going into the second song, at first I thought that sample was like your girls talking, and that brings me to my point about the second song. I'll
Oh
come back
yeah.
to it, but like you go ahead and talking about the second
So
song.
the second song, Sad Boy, I mean that one has a lot of that's really about kind of a picture of like where I'm at now in terms of like, I mean, really just everything, you know, being a parent and dealing with societal issues, you know, and a lot of that song had to do with like, you know, police brutality and like really just like the way that Chicago has been presented and perceived and like really structured to like a lot of the shit that all these candidates talk about on the news, you know, and like crime rates and all these things, like these communities have been sabotaged, and constantly we see people that aren't from Chicago talking about Chicago,
Of course.
saying all this shit, feeling away. And you know, I understand if you watch the news, like naturally you're gonna feel away. But if you look at the history, like these places were structurally sabotaged and stripped of opportunity. And it's really just about like, you know, you can make anything look the way that you want it to look on paper. People like dudes like Andrew Tate tell lies using truth.
Yeah.
This is this is what your
That's really
enemies. This is what enemies that are like worthy of combating because they're able to operate at a level. Like this is what people do. They use the truth, but they push it through a scope to create a narrative that suits what they're trying to say, you know?
Yeah, that's one of the best ways I've ever heard of saying it. Like using the truth to spread lies.
The enemies use the truth to spread lies.
Yeah.
Like I promise you, that's the whole thing, and that's really like the theme of the song, you know. And it really came from a conversation with my daughter because you know, my kids, their mom is half Colombian, so my youngest looks like a straight white girl, but my oldest, she looks Colombian, you know? And it's almost a disservice to not have a conversation about the way that some of the world views and treats people that are different, you know? And the conversation of like, you know, the world as it stands will treat you differently than your sister based on this. So you know, it was really just like juggling that concept within the scope of like being a parent, being a Chicagoan, and just like, you know, the bullshitters are just constantly crafting their narratives, you know what I mean? And it's an inevitability.
Yeah, that was the part that like stuck out to me the most when you was talking about the difference between her and her sister, because like you really don't see that for real, where you got to explain and talk to them differently. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's like a harsh reality that you got to like set in with yourself for real.
Or just like having to have the conversation of like the people that care about that type of shit are gonna take issue with the way that you look. Cause like kids are gonna ask you shit, you know? You can't lie to them.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, unfortunately, the people that care about that shit, you know, the people that are like operating on a racial level, like yeah, they're gonna take issue with you, and it's just like fucking shitty to think about as a parent. But you know, that's really what that song was about for me, was just juggling all of that.
Word. And the last song is slower, right?
Yeah. So Cabin Fever is actually the oldest song in the project. I wrote that like peak COVID, which is why it's like so much. It's like about being stuck inside, and like it's really about like, again, looking at life through the scope of like, I think when COVID happened, we all didn't really know what to expect, and it kind of felt like, you know, it's silly in hindsight, but when it was first happening, it was like, damn, is this the end?
No, God, for real. I remember looking outside, I was like, yo, this might be it for real.
So it was like COVID happened. My relationship was newer at the time, so I was like looking at this, you know, maybe ending version of life through the scope of a new love that's like, you know, we were all forced inside. So it's like the relationship that was new, we had like moved in together, and it was just like one thing, but we had, you know, now we're all smashed inside and everybody's working from home, so like life is on hyper speed. We're all thinking about ourselves and like being able to focus on different things, and like, you know, that was a benefit for some people and it was a detriment for other people. But I was just looking at it through like, you know, is this the end, and what does that mean? And just kind of going crazy inside the house and trying to figure out a way to put that into words, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's up, yo. Yeah, all three of the songs run beautifully together. Like you said, it really set a scene, and it's very like it's got like the sonics have depth within them. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? But I want to talk about the recording, the process of recording it for real.
Yeah.
Is this your first time like doing more of a singing, auto tuning, like melodic type singing? Because I know normally you mix people rapping.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of time in terms of self production, yeah, I did like a couple like indie pop projects back in the day
Hmm.
where I was like singing, but it definitely wasn't like I was definitely afraid to do anything that resembled rapping
Hmm.
in the past. And now after like producing and damn near ghostwriting so much rap, it just kind of like I've just ripped the band-aid off, you know?
Hmm.
And ripped the band-aid off of like it's cool to try and be like noticed or whatever, but I'm also like trying to challenge myself to like maybe feel a little bit weird or like
Yeah.
spit it or like put out a bar where I'll be like, damn, like is that like was that like too cute
Uh
or some shit? You know what I
huh.
mean? Or
Yeah. No, for real.
like but again, it's like back to the catharsis of it is like
I always tell people that when you're going for that, like if you don't feel stupid by the end while you're doing it, you ain't doing good enough.
because you have to leave yourself a little exposed and vulnerable, you
Hmm.
know, because that's what makes
And it can be hard to get through that too, for real.
oh for sure.
Like a lot of times, like you could, you really, you really got to come out your comfort zone and like lay when you lay down your voice on the track to try to get that emotion through. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like a lot of times you just stuck in this so monotone. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah,
like
you
you gotta be not afraid to go to that.
you gotta set your gangster to the side and do
For
some
real,
real
to go
shit
to
for
that
real.
next level so people
Yeah.
can really understand. You feel me?
Yeah, definitely. I think you definitely have to tap into something that like leaves you feeling a little bit exposed, you know? I think
Hmm.
that's how you can tell that it's like if I make something really synthetic and like I didn't put my heart in it, like I don't really care as much. It's when you've really dumped your all into everything that you're like, fuck, like I hope
Hmm.
I
Another
hope they at least don't hate it.
Another thing I always tell people is like, just because you have auto tune in your voice does not mean it's gonna sound good for real. You
Oh
really
no,
gotta
not
know.
at
You
all.
gotta know how to like carry a note at least. You
For
know what I'm
sure.
saying?
And I definitely pitch correct more than I would like obviously we're using auto tune and things like that, but like in terms of like recording and method,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely more of like a dynamic situation of like I don't really want it to sound tuned if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you gotta get that punchiness in
Did
there.
you
You know what I
enjoy?
mean?
Did you enjoy recording this one?
I love recording that. The cool thing about this one is like some of it Sad Boy or no, really RIP was the only one that I was like, okay, I'm gonna make this piece of music that's specifically for me. The other two, well, no, Cabin Fever also was too. Cabin Fever came about organically, but Sad Boy was like a beat that I had made for somebody else and like a beat pack that never got used. And I just had always thought about it and I just ran with it. So yeah, that one was really
I
dope.
know what I'm recording. Like I'll be like, all right, take 34.
Oh yeah, I mean my take comp situation is like pretty intense, you know. I try to do like I at a base level I do 5 takes of everything typically and then I will like comp from there to get like the best sounding piece.
For sure.
But I'll definitely do 50 takes if I have to.
So ideally, when someone walks away from listening to this project, what do you want them to feel? What do you want them to be thinking about?
I mean, if it leaves them with anything, I would hope that it leaves them contemplative of the impact that they'll leave when they're here and what that, and to think of whatever their own uh, concept of like a karmic return is. You know what I mean? That's really what the moment in time is of thinking like, who was I? What am I? You know what I mean? What am I but the culmination of like my love and my fear and my hopes and dreams and my misgivings and my benefits and my doubts, you know what I mean? It's really just like be willing to look at yourself for everything you are, your light and your dark, you know? Because that's really the only way to like grow and figure out where the fuck you're going.
Yeah. For sure. Sounds good, yo. Well, the project is out
The 24th,
24th.
Thursday.
Okay. Y'all be sure to check that out. It's going to be on all DSPs.
Yep.
Visuals coming soon.
Yeah, they'll be dropping with the project. I think this interview will be coming out after that, so.
Okay. Which video is dropping?
I think I'm gonna I might drop them all at the same time.
Okay. Okay. Well, once again, my name is Saint Ick. I want to thank Juggernaut for letting us use the
Yeah,
space.
thank you so much, Chicago Icon. Thank you so much for letting us host this here today. It really means everything.
JimmyITK,
Thanks,
SAMSARA, out this Thursday. Skirt.